Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we've got a scroll saw Valentine's heart frame. Well, right about now, there are a bunch of you asking where is the model build this week. Guys, we're going to take a break for 1 week, and that's okay. The build is long enough. There's nothing wrong with taking a break and adding a couple projects in between, and I may just do that throughout the build, depending on how extensive it gets. Either way, I've got a viewer request this week. I had someone contact me, and I did ask for show ideas, and they asked, how about a scroll saw Valentine's project? So I came up with a pattern that I can share with you guys. I kind of designed it on the computer, and we're going to make the frame today for the first time here on the show, and we're going to see how we make out with it. So let's head over to the bench, and I'll show you what I've got in mind. Well, I remember years ago, my father made a heart-shaped frame for my mother that stood on a stand. I don't really recall the details of it, but this design is based loosely on what I remember him making. So what I've done here is I've gone on the computer and I've created this heart frame, and it's a very, well, I'm not going to say it's a simple cutout, but it can be as long as you take your time. So we're going to cut this piece here out of some 1/2-inch thick stock. We have the base for our frame because this frame is designed, in this case, to sit on a table or on a display stand or a shelf or what have you. 1-inch thick stock, a very simple base with a V-groove cutout that exactly matches our heart base down here. And as well, we have this circle here that's cut. This is our backer that will hold in both our picture, our backer board, and our piece of acrylic that we're going to use for our glass on our frame. Now guys, I printed this out from the PDF that I made up, and it's actually printed at 91% of the original size to be able to fit here on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. But by all means, if you want to enlarge it or reduce it, you can do that. There's no problem with that whatsoever. So we're going to start off with our heart frame. So the first thing that we need to do is I need to get some 1/2-inch thick stock. We're going to coat it completely with masking tape, and once we get that done, we're going to spray the back of our pattern of the heart with some spray adhesive. We'll let that tack up for a full 3 minutes, and then we will rub it down onto our masking tape. Guys, a lot of people wonder why we let it tack up for 3 minutes. That 3 minutes makes that glue, the spray adhesive, it makes it a temporary bond. So you can peel it off if you need to. It will leave some glue residue, but at least it's not going to be stuck there permanently and be tearing up the pattern as you're trying to take it off. So that is the reason for letting it sit for the 3 minutes. Either way, let's head over, for starters, to the drill press. Well, I didn't have any 1/2-inch cherry, and that's what I wanted to make the heart out of, so we are going with 3/4. That's okay, it works. Guys, there are 4 cutouts here, 4 interior cuts. This one up here, this one here, this center circle, not the dotted line, but the center circle, and this bottom piece right here. So for each one of those, you're going to want to drill a blade entry hole. My suggestion is that you want to drill the hole fairly close to the sharp points of your heart top sections here and this bottom point section, and somewhere close to the edge of the circle. Well, I have installed a brand new number 7 PGT blade into the saw, and we're going to start with this bottom cut. Now, you may be wondering why I said to drill the holes close to the sharpest points. Well, there's a method to cut sharp points like this, and I'm just going to show you what that method is. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut along one of these lines. It doesn't matter which. We're going to come in just until we get to the tip of that sharp angle. And at this point, you can back the blade out, come into your entry hole, and then back into that saw curve. And now using that corner, turn your blade into that sharp corner. And we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to stop at the sharp corner here, back our blade out, go into our blade entry hole, spin it around, back our blade into the hole, and then again, you can readjust and finish the cut. Now this first corner that we did is not perfectly cut, so you can come in and almost use the edge of the blade as a file to finish it off. And there you go, nice crisp corners. We'll just get that waste piece out of there. Very nice crisp corners, and it looks great. So we're going to use the same method here in these sharp corners to get the heart shapes cut at the top. But I want to move on to the circle here, because for a tool that is meant to cut sharp curves and that sort of thing, it's amazing to me that the hardest thing to cut on a scroll saw is a circle. You have to keep in mind the method here. This blade doesn't move other than up and down, so you control the feed rate. You also control the turn rate. And in order to cut a perfect circle, your feed rate and your turn rate have to be identical. If your feed rate is faster than your turn rate, you'll end up with a large arch. If your turn rate is faster than your feed rate, you end up with a tight circle. So what you need to do is keep the feed and the turning at the same rate in order to pull off a perfect circle. It takes practice, and even with me, with all the years experience, I think I'm almost 30 years on the scroll saw. Even with all that experience, even I still have trouble with it sometimes. So let's get this circle cut. Now guys, I went off a little bit on this side and a little bit over here. I'm not too concerned about it. We're gonna straighten that up in just a little bit. So using the tips I've given you, cut out these last two interior cuts. Well, it's now time to cut our main shape, and you may notice that I've drilled a hole in the top and the bottom. This is not an interior cut, but I just find this a little easier when it comes to things like this. I like to do the interior cut because it keeps it intact and gives me more things to grab onto. So what we're going to do is we're going to start here at the bottom, at the point, and we're going to cut all the way around to this top corner here where we're going to stop it. We're going to back out and cut into this hole, spin our blade around, and do that same sharp corner turn that we did on all the other interior cuts. And now you just want to follow through all the way down to the end of the cut to meet up at the bottom point of your heart to finish your cutting. And with that cut, we can take it out of there. Now guys, there was a little bit of an issue at the top where I was trying to turn the piece around, and I don't know if the grain closed up on me or what happened, but I was unable to spin the blade properly. So we're just going to clean up that little part there, just using the side of the blade, the kerf, as a file kind of thing, as I showed you before. And now we can take this over to the oscillating drum sander. Now, if you're not confident in your ability to cut a circle, you can cut outside the lines and then use the oscillating drum to finish it off. For me, I did cut up to the lines, but I do see a little bit of unevenness there, and in a frame, that sort of thing can really stick out. So we're just going to use the oscillating drum sander just to even it up and make it look right. Well, I have a 1/8 round over router bit installed in the router table, and on the front face of the inside circle of this frame, we're going to place a 1/8 round over. Well, I've changed the bit now and put in a bearing guided rabbiting bit, and I have a bearing put on it such that it will take a 1/8 inch deep rabbet out of our frame. I'm going to take it a little bit at a time, but you want to cut this rabbet to be as deep as your backer board plus whatever you're going to use for your glass. In my case, I'm going to make the backer board a 1/4 inch. I thought I had some 1/16 inch thick acrylic, but I only have 1/8. So my total depth here is going to be 3/8 of an inch. So it's a good thing that I had the 3/4 inch cherry. Either way, let's get this routed. And with that done, we can now peel off our pattern and give the entire heart a good sanding. Well, I now have a 1/4 inch thick piece of cherry, and just like I did with the heart pattern, I've covered it with masking tape, and I'm using spray adhesive, and we're going to attach our backer board pattern onto our 1/4 inch thick stock. Now guys, depending on how your routing went for your rabbet, this circle may or may not fit. You may not have the bearing to do this exact same thing. So before you cut this, just measure your routed rabbet and make sure that this circle is going to fit inside. So now we're going to take this over to the scroll saw and we're going to cut this circle out. Okay, and we can just test the fit in our rabbeted hole. It's a little loose, but I'm not too concerned about it. It should be just fine. So at this point, what we want to do is I'm going to take this cutout, I'm going to give it a sanding, but then I'm going to use this cutout to trace on some 1/8 inch thick acrylic. And from there, we're going to take it over to the scroll saw and cut that acrylic out. And guys, the key to cutting acrylic on a scroll saw is slow the speed down. Heat and friction is your enemy here. It will cause you so many problems. So slow the saw down and you should be just fine. Well, as long as you take your time on your cutting and your measuring and marking, your acrylic should fit in just like that. And then your backer board should fit just like that. Now, if this backer board isn't tight enough in there for you, cut it again. It's a small little 3" by 3" piece of cherry. It's not a big expense. And we now need something to hold this all together. And for that, we have a few photo turns. So all we're going to do is we're going to mount 3 photo turns. One right here in the top, one right down here in the bottom, and one right here. So I'm going to drill some pilot holes for those 3 and get those screwed into place. Well, at this point, if you want, you can be done with this. You can put a hanger on it and hang it on the wall, and you have yourself your Valentine's heart frame. However, I do want to make this cutout. Well, I've now cut the piece for my base over at the table saw out of some 1" thick walnut in this case. It's 1 1/8 wide, 5 7/16 of an inch long. Now, there's 2 ways you can go about it. You can take your pattern and you can glue it on the side, and you can go under the assumption that your cutting is perfect and cut this little V-notch out here over at the scroll saw and be done with it. Or you can think maybe your line isn't so perfect and we can use our actual heart to trace the profile onto our piece of wood. And I think that's what I'm going to do. So we're going to mark the center line. I'm going to place my heart on top of it just like this, about 2/3 of the way down through our stock. I'm going to mark it, and once I get it marked, then we're going to take it over to the scroll saw and cut it out. And there is your stand, and we can just give this a good sanding. If you want, you can put a round over on these long edges here just to give it a little bit of softness, and then we can glue our heart frame right there like that, right inside of our stand. Just center it so that it's kind of recessed on the front and the back. Well, we've been hitting the laser shows heavy recently, so what would this project be without a little laser engraving on the back? Valentine's Day 2024, and all you need to do is add your picture. Guys, you can use your piece of acrylic to put over the picture to mark out the circle of where to cut it so you know exactly what it's going to look like in the frame. And that's it. A cute little Valentine's Day picture frame. And there you have it. A scroll saw Valentine's Day heart frame. This project is not only simple, but it's a lot of fun. And you know what, guys? I learned something myself on this project, and I'll tell you what I learned. For years, I thought that my father made the original scroll saw frame that inspired this one. And as it turns out, I was talking to my mother, and my father didn't make it at all. My mother made it. And she still has the frame today. So I got her to send me a couple pictures of it. So here you go. There's the inspiration for the frame that I made today. Guys, this project is, as I said, is a ton of fun, and there may be some of you that are a little inhibited by the routering of that rabbit in the back of the frame. That is not an issue. Instead of making this out of 3/4 inch thick wood, making the heart section, make it out of 2 3/8 of an inch thick pieces. What you want to do is make them exactly the same, identical, as far as their dimensions, length and width. And on one of the frames, you will cut the size of the rabbit, that dotted line hole. On the front piece, or the opposite piece, you will cut the smaller opening that will show the picture. Once you're happy with both of those, you'll line up the edges of your frames, and as long as you had your holes lined up, you can glue them together. Instant rabbit on a square piece of board. From there, you can just attach your pattern, aligning the hole in the center, and cut out the rest of the frame. And as long as you were careful with your alignment, you end up with your rabbit. So no need for the router at all. That round over inside the frame doesn't have to be done with a router. You can sand it by hand. I made this out of cherry. You can sand this stuff with your finger. Guys, this is a fantastic project. It's a load of fun, and it looks great. I can't wait to get the finish on this, to have the color of the cherry come out and the color of the walnut contrasting the cherry. It should look great. Either way, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this project. I'm hoping that you're going to try this one for yourself because it honestly is a ton of fun. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you are interested in the pattern for this frame, all you have to do is go to my website. Visit www.acutabovewoodworkings.com and click on the free pattern section. I will have the PDF there. It's a free download. Download it, print it, make as many as you want, sell the frames if you want. I don't care. I made the pattern to share, and that's what we're going to do. So grab it from the website and have yourself some fun with it. I want to thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. We have an amazing audience base here, and I'm hoping that you're going to consider becoming a part of that. I hope you've enjoyed today's program, folks. I hope that you're going to give this one a try for yourself. I really hope that you're going to have a special Valentine's Day with your loved one. And more importantly, I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video. And we'll get back to our model build, I promise.